Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in for the first session of Proud Parent. I'm Stephanie Terry, Executive Director at the Children's Museum of Evansville, where we inspire learning through play. Proud Parent is a speaker series that aims to provide information and resources for parents to better support our growing community's children. This series will feature local and regional thought leaders who will provide their perspective on various topics that matter to children, families, and our community with the emphasis on play. For almost a year now, this pandemic has impacted every part of our lives. It has caused a lot of stress and anxiety. It has disrupted how children learn. Some children had drive-by birthday celebrations. During the holidays, we were separated. So I'm excited about today's discussion because we will share information on how to protect the mental health of our families. Joining me today are our friends from Youth First and Southwestern Behavioral Healthcare. Amy Steele is the Youth First social worker at Resurrection School. Amy is a registered play therapy supervisor with specialized training and experience using play to help children work through difficult emotions, learn new skills, and experience healing. Sedalia Ellis is a licensed social worker and has served in the social work profession for 13 years with experience treating adults, couples, and families. She is trained in several evidence-based psychotherapy approaches. So let's jump right into the conversation. First, we want to start with a personal story. Recently, Sedalia's family was directly impacted by COVID-19. Sedalia, can you tell us a little bit about your family's experience?
Sure. So for the past few months, we have been trying to do everything that we can to not get COVID, to protect our family. Both myself and my husband, we are essential workers. And so doing the best that we can to make sure that our family stays safe. Over the Christmas holiday, to my surprise, COVID came and hit our home. And the whirlwind that it sent us through, just as far as knowing what to do during those times, leaning on our support systems, as well as, having those difficult conversations with my children, because kids have access to so many things now, as far as the internet, social media. And so they have formed ideas and opinions about COVID and what is COVID and really genuine fears. And so my husband and I, during that time, had to have the conversation with my children once I tested positive for COVID, because they were fearful that mommy is, gonna die. And I never thought about that until that moment. And being a mom that's all hands on deck and not being able to provide that emotional support to my kids really hurt me. And my husband, he did a phenomenal job. He stepped in and was that emotional support for them. But it made me realize, the impact of COVID to the extent of when it actually hits your home. For so many months, we've set different protective factors in place that allowed us to be safe. And during this moment, we were no longer necessarily safe from this invisible monster that we've been trying to not get for several months. And so just having to really navigate that. And some days myself, being quarantined, having to navigate and process my emotions separate from my family, and having to cut myself off from social media and from the news, because every moment you saw some type of statistics regarding COVID, and I was in the process of fighting COVID. And so just learning in that during that time of how to keep myself in a healthy space, as well as my children and my husband.
Thank you, Sedalia, for sharing. I think you're not alone in terms of the feelings and kind of the experience that you're having, and we really just don't realize the impact it has on young children.
Mhm.
4 and 5 year old children that are dealing with
Yeah.
grief and disconnection from people that they rely on every day. And so, what we're gonna do is if we're gonna shift into talking about some of the signs to look for in young children when there is a problem as it relates to mental health. Amy, will you share?
Sure. I'm going to share my screen real quick here. So these are mental health concerns that we certainly want to look for in children during the time of COVID, but also anytime. Sometimes currently with the COVID situation, stressors are higher for adults and for children. So we may be seeing more signs of these, or perhaps not. Children are resilient, and some kids are kind of going through it like everything's great and that it's not a big change in their life. But other kids, the stress is really, really weighing on them. And whether kids show it to us or not, they are definitely feeling the stress. Even young infants can tell when a parent is under stress, and can kind of pick that up from them. So it's important to be aware of these factors to watch for. Now, I want to preface these signs. As children develop, there are going to be times when they may have all of these symptoms, not at the same time, but they may experience all of these symptoms. And that's part of normal emotional growth and development of a child. When to be concerned is when it becomes excessive, when there are a lot of extremes, perhaps in their behavior, when there are big changes that happen rather quickly from how they typically are to something drastically different. And also we'll talk about the duration of some of these. So yes, kids have periods of time when they're angry or irritable, for an example. But if this is consistent and extreme, that's when you really want to be aware. So excessive worry or fear is something that we are seeing a little more in kids right now, related to COVID in general, or like Sedelia said, worrying about their parents if their parents are ill or family members. A lot of the children that I'm around, one of the things that their family is working towards is not only keeping them safe, but like grandparents and things like that. And so that can also be a concern for children, who maybe don't even get to see grandparents as much, or other adults they're close to. And then also knowing this is a bigger threat perhaps to these older people that they're really close to but not getting to spend time with. So that can be a big fear for children also. So feeling excessively sad or low, this is when to really get concerned is if it's pretty consistent for 2 or more weeks. That's kind of a sign. Problems concentrating or learning, and sometimes you see this easier when children are in school, but at home you can see this also if there were tasks that they used to have an easier time sticking to, but are not have. It's difficult more now. Drastic changes in mood, behavior, and personality. So, like I said, just an extreme change that you're noticing. Frequent headaches or stomach aches. This is a way that a lot of children express perhaps anxiety or other types of concerns. Of course, if your child has headaches and stomach aches, you want to rule out any medical problems. But sometimes kids do have somatic complaints, where they actually feel headaches or stomach aches, but it's because of their worry or their anxiety or other large feelings that they're having. Um, if they're choosing to avoid friends or social activities, this can be something that can be concerning. Oh, excuse me. And then also prolonged strong feelings. So this might be what we consider emotionality, where they're having, strong feelings of sadness or strong feelings of anything, or even kind of mood swings where they're kind of bouncing around more in their moods than you're used to. And you know, teenagers, for example, go through this, but also younger kids do too. When it can't be explained otherwise, or it's perhaps more extreme than other children of that age feeling, is a time to also be concerned. Excessive irritability or anger, which I talked about. If they're intentionally hurting themselves or talking about hurting themselves, that's something that you want to talk to your family doctor or a therapist about. And if they're talking about death or suicide. So asking questions about death because they're fearful of it for COVID would be different than talking about they're personally wanting to die or about suicide. Some children do have fears about death, even before COVID was in our picture. And even for these kids or other children, this may be more prominent now just because we hear it in the media more. We hear statistics every day about how many deaths there were, or perhaps somebody they know has died of it. So that may be putting a little bit more fear in them. But again, as a parent, gauging, does this seem to be normal and they're working through it, or is this a big concern and like they're you know they're talking about them wanting to die or wanting to kill themselves. And that is certainly something you want to get checked out by a professional right away. You don't want to play around with that or wait on that.
Thank you, Amy. I started to, as you were reading those off, I started to think about my own teenager and some of that irritability I'd even dealt with early this morning. So definitely mindful of some of the signs that we need to watch for. So Delia, I would almost bet that you're going to mirror some of these same signs from adult perspective. Tell us a little bit what we should be looking for, that some of us as parents may be experiencing.
Absolutely. So as we all know, COVID is something that pretty much paused the world. And so with that being paused, a lot of the things that we're used to doing, the supports we're used to having, the activities that we're used to engaging in, we no longer have those. And so the whole world, honestly, is grieving the loss of something, someone, whether it's connections, whether it's, going to your favorite concert. And so we have to take a step back and look at how that affects adults as on a mental health level. Because now you're a teacher. Now you're the recess teacher. Now you're having to do dual roles, work and provide those teaching skills in the home. And we're all grieving the loss of those things. And so majority of the times during this time, we see two things where adults start to feel a lot of depression and anxiety. And there's a such thing called situational depression or like adjustment disorder. And that's what we're all going through during this time because it's traumatic. And a lot of times people label trauma as some big, huge event, but trauma is defined based on that person's experience. And so if it's something that's bothering you to the point where it is now affecting your day-to-day life, the things that you would normally do, the things that you would typically engage with, that's traumatic to you. And so that's trauma. And with trauma goes hand in hand depression and anxiety. So some of the symptoms that you can look for as far as depression is just like Amy said, even with kids, sadness, being irritable. A lot of times, and I'm a pause right there because a lot of people don't know that when you have someone who has excessive irritability, that's a sign of depression. A lot of times we think of, the woe is me or the very sad, but there's also those who are irritable. Loss of interest in pleasurable activities. So things that you would typically do that you enjoy doing, whether it's tennis, whether it's engaging in a book club, whether it's engaging with your family on a movie night. When you start to see that you no longer have the desire to do so, you no longer have the desire to engage in things that make you happy, then there are chances that you may be feeling some symptoms of depression. Thoughts of suicide and death. And I'm gonna stick a pin right here because Amy did phenomenal with, really defining the difference between thinking about death and then having thoughts of death. let's face it, during COVID, I'm pretty sure all of us have thought about death at some point in time. If I were to catch this virus, then how would this affect my body? You know, is my body strong enough to recover? What if I die? What will happen to my children? What will happen to my spouse? What does that look like? And so it's normal to have those feelings because we're fighting this invisible monster. That's what I like to call it. And the fact that this is something that's new to us all. And the very fear is that we don't know how COVID's going to affect a person. And so a lot of times you have to honestly go through that experience to come out on the other end to know I survived COVID just like me. So there's a difference between, you know, thoughts of suicide and death and just constantly and thinking about death. And then, you know, extreme tiredness, disturbance in your sleep or appetite. And typically when we're looking at, you know, saying, you know, someone coming to Southwestern to receive services, we look at the duration. How long has this been taking place? What prompted these things? And typically it's 2 or more weeks. So, you know, a lot of times, you know, people don't understand that when we are assessing that there is a duration in time that we are looking for so that we can help you address the problem. Now, I'm gonna get into anxiety. Anxiety, and a lot of people more so can identify anxiety first versus depression, just because anxiety is connected to almost like your gut. And so when you start to have, just like Amy said, excessive stomach aches, you know, sometimes people have experienced feelings like they feel like they want to vomit every, you know, during a certain specific time, or when they're being triggered and they don't, that can be anxiety. Increased breathing rate, increased heart rate, sweating. You can also have some agitation because during that time you're trying to work on containing your feelings and your emotion, but the outside world is still going. So you can have some agitation. And then anxiety and depression can overlap. You can have anxiety and depression. And that overlap period could be restlessness, trouble thinking, concentrating, making decisions. And that's a huge one. When COVID started, like every parent in the world had to figure out whether or not to send their children to school or to homeschool, and whether or not you're a bad parent if you send your kids to school because you're an essential worker and that you're putting them in an environment where they could possibly catch COVID and bring it back home. So that was a huge piece for parents across the globe. Again, anxiety and depression can overlap with excessive worrying, you know, and there's a difference between your general worry and then something that you're constantly thinking about over and over again. I call it Rolodex thinking, where your mind never stops. That's excessive worrying. And then again, agitation. So those are some of the signs and symptoms that you can look for as a parent, or even if you're on this, watching this, and you're not a parent, and we're all being affected by this, what anxiety and depression is.
Well, I'm learning so much. Thank you both for sharing kind of some of the signs and things we need to look for. But let's talk about really what's probably most important. How do we protect our mental health as a family unit, and even as a, you know, individually, collective as young children, and then the adults?
Well, for kids, I think one of the best things you can do is have a routine. Kids thrive on routine, and that stability is so much for them. So, bedtime routines, morning routines, these are so comforting for kids. And just knowing that a whole lot in our world is so different, but some things in our family have not changed is so comforting to them. Family meals, family traditions. So like little weekly things that you do. Obviously, our holidays look different for everybody this year, but still holding on to those traditions, even with Valentine's Day coming up, you know, just having those special times, whether it's Friday night pizza night or family game night, any of those things that can just be comforting and consistent to the children is so very important. Not always for kids, but especially now when our world is chaotic, that comfort at home is so important. Also, carving out time to play with the kids. Um, Pretend play, board games, outdoor play when they can, and play with them. This is where kids' minds, bodies um, develop. Play is the child's language. So as you're playing with them, if they're scared of something and they either don't have the words to tell you, or maybe they're shy about telling you, or not a good communicator, or whatever, it will come out in their play. And if you pay attention, you can see these, and you can even help them work through the problems through the play. Or you can save it up in your memory and think, oh, at bedtime tonight, when we're reading the book, I might bring this up. It might be a good comforting time for them. Also, making that extra time for nurturing and emotional expression, extra hugs, cuddle time, just that, physical contact that children need is even more important together, for them to have together. Encourage them and support them in taking on new challenges. They may not be able to join a new team this year, but they could try new roles in the home, maybe learning to cook, or learning to clean. My kids learned to clean bathrooms, and they really hadn't had to do that much before COVID, but they're really good at it now. Just different things, and encouraging them as they do it to problem solve. This builds their confidence, and it shows that even though we're not going out and doing all the things we used to do, there's still things that we can do and challenges that we can take. We touched on earlier, Sedelia was talking about the importance with her children of limiting the media and news exposure. On a normal day, that's important to do, but also with COVID and things going on in our world, these can be scary and stressful to kids. That doesn't mean that you don't let them know what's going on. So you don't avoid talking to them about COVID or other things going on in the world, but you talk to them at their level with age appropriate explanations and answer questions according to their developmental level. There's you can tell a kid the truth about something without telling them all the scary details. You can give them the information they need without them having to know every in and out of it. That it's just more than a child needs to know. So kind of funneling that and siphoning that is important. Let's see. Again, the age and the stage matters with the child. Before age 8, kids are really into that reality versus fantasy world, and they spend so much of their time in that fantasy world. This can be really powerful in their play, but when it comes to fears and other concerns, it can kind of take on a life of its own. Now that kids are more isolated than they used to, a lot of them are spending more time in that fantasy world, and sometimes that means their fears are getting bigger than they need to be because they're imagining things worse than they really are, or thinking of worst case scenarios more than you usually do when you're distracted by playing with friends or sports or other things. So learning that, for example, magical thinking is a kid that as a part of that fantasy world. So kids may think that, if grandma got COVID and got really sick, maybe I was thinking about that grandma might get COVID. And so I gave grandma COVID. Mm-hmm. We know that those things don't all line up, but in magical thinking, that does make sense. I remember a child in a similar situation, the child, when they were in Girl Scouts, their grandfather left the grandmother the night of a Girl Scout performance. And for years, the child felt like it was their fault that grandpa left grandma because grandma was at their performance. So talking with children and making sure that they have the full story in their age appropriate manner is really important so that their fears and their magical thinking don't scare them more or lead them to guilt and shame. And then finally, modeling healthy feelings and expressions to them and modeling healthy coping skills. So saying, Mom's really stressed right now, or I had a hard day is okay. You don't need to go into all the details of it, but to let them know I have hard times too. I have days where I'm frustrated. I have times when I'm sad. And this is how I get through it. I talk to a friend, I exercise, I, write in my journal. And I want you to do these things too, because I know that you are going to have hard days and hard times. And I want you to learn these healthy coping skills also, is very important.
Thank you, Amy. Again, you all are providing such great nuggets, even just for me to kind of reflect on some things that I could do differently. And in communication, I think I heard over and over is how you express your feelings. And it's important for us to model that for our children. So Dale, you have, because I'm eager really to talk a little bit more how play contributes to this picture. But so Dale, you have any other thoughts on, what we should be doing and ways we can protect our mental health?
Sure. A lot of what I will say will overlap with Amy, even on the adult end. But I think one of the big things is learning and knowing that you can set boundaries for yourself. Because with COVID, and especially when it started, um, a lot of people had various feelings and beliefs about what they should do and how they should be. And so that created additional stressors for family units, depending on what your immediate family unit thought they should do, as well as the extended unit. And so do what you feel comfortable, do what makes you feel safe, not for just you, but also for the children in your home. When COVID first hit, we actually had a family discussion about what is COVID, what this looks like, and what we can do as a family to keep ourselves safe. So that not only included or helped my children discuss their fears and things that they would like to continue doing and how can we do that in a safe way, but it also helped me to understand them and express some of my concerns as a parent. And so I think setting that boundary in place, as far as what makes you feel comfortable despite what family members may think or say, you have to do what makes you feel comfortable. And then the second thing is also doing what you enjoy. Now, that's different because a lot of things like Zumba class at the Y or Zumba, or a boxing class, whatever you may engage in, you may not be able to go to that physical building. But now the world of like Zoom and virtual meetings, is really thriving. And so we have to look at how can we keep ourselves well and sane, and doing things a different way, and also accepting the reality of what it is. If you don't accept it, then you're going to continue to live in the space where regretting how things have moved and wishing that you were still going to those after dinner business meetings, or after the kids are at bed, social cocktail hours, or however it may be, what you engage in. And so you have to really accept that this is going on. We're in the middle of a pandemic, and how can I create a well-balanced place for myself and continue to do the things that I enjoy doing, but do them in a safe manner, and getting plenty of sleep. With everything going on in the world, the news, the media, like that can really draw you in, and it can get to the point where you start to lose sleep because you're so interested in, well, what's the next number of people who have passed away in the United States, or when is the next vaccination dosage is going to be sent out to the United States. And so you get to the point where you're watching and listening to the news so much that you miss out on sleep, and your body needs sleep in order to rejuvenate itself and in order to thrive. So make sure you're getting plenty of sleep, and then making time for you to unwind. Sometimes when I come in from work, I have to tell my children, hey, I need 30 minutes to myself. 30 minutes so that I can unwind. Because if I get these 30 minutes, then I can be my best self for you. And I have to take care of me first in order to be able to provide that to my children. And a lot of parents feel guilty for doing that. But if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of your children or all the other obligations that you have. So take time to unwind. Remember, continue connecting with others. It may not be face to face, as far as physically, but I mean, between Zoom, between, your ability to video chat on your phones, make it fun. Do a family game night. Even though you're not physically there in the room, just being on the same video chat or video platform and playing games together, it really increases your sense of belonging and knowing that you're not in this by yourself, and knowing that, okay, yes, this is different, but we are doing things to really help us to continue to connect, continue to be in a great mental space, and just get our minds off of what's going on in the world with this pandemic. And then for those who are spiritual, continue to connect with your community church, your faith-based churches, whether it be, through Zoom. I've seen all type of unique ways of connecting that the faith-based world has established. And so we are all in this together. We are all learning together. And so we have to accept what it is and how can we put ourselves in the best position to be our best self during this pandemic.
Absolutely. And I think both of you all, in some way or another, refer to play. And so, Amy, would you mind just sharing a little bit more specifically how play really contributes to the healthy development of kids? And even in some respects, it's important for us as adults to
Absolutely.
have a good time, to connect and enjoy. So, Amy, share just a few things with us before we close out this afternoon session.
Sure. So play, like I said earlier, is the language of children. They communicate their fears and distress through their behaviors and their play, and through play, they can work through them also. Play relieves feelings of distress and boredom in kids. It creates connection to others. So it's also that time where you're bonding with a friend, a teacher, and most importantly, your parent. It stimulates creative thinking and exploration. Seeing a child explore from a very young age their environment through their play is so exciting for a parent or caregiver. But even I have high schoolers, and watching them go outside and noticing the difference in the things that intrigue them and that they explore now, um, is still a way that they're learning and growing. And so play is so important for that. It helps regulate emotions. They can act out their feelings through play. Even if you're playing a board game, you can put those emotions into a board game in a way that maybe it's difficult for them to express just on other levels. Um, it builds confidence and mastery. This is how kids and adults learn and grow and become more confident. When we think of adult playing, we're also trying out social situations and things like that. But this is where kids really develop those first lessons in it is through their play and as they grow and advance in their play. And it builds resiliency. It builds through the with the children that ability to get through things and to have those emotional and social skills that help them know that they can get through difficult things, whatever's thrown their way. And I think that will be a huge, maybe the biggest takeaway from these COVID times is that this was really hard, and it didn't go the way we wanted it to all the time, even from wearing masks to to other things. But in the end, we're getting through it. And as a family, we're getting through it. And there will be great memories from it. I know you were talking about playing games. I would say one of my children's, and they're in high school, one of their favorite memories from the quarantine, the initial quarantine, is we would play games with my parents. My parents were at their house and we'd set up FaceTime and we would play card games and one of us would play for them. But we did that several times and it was certainly different, but a great memory that we can take out of this. And so having those memories, taking those pictures of, hey, you can do hard things. You can get through this, you know. Um, I'm amazed by 3-year-olds that can go through a whole day wearing a mask because I see a lot of 50-year-olds that cannot, you know, so they really are mastering these things and being able to play out their frustrations is a great way to do that. We also have other social and emotional learning activities for families on the Youth First website, and I think we have that link, but it's youthfirstinc.org. And under the resource tab, there are some resiliency activities and exercises for all ages. So also the other thing to keep in mind is that if a child or an adult feels like that they're having difficulty, to please know that there is support in our community to reach out, that you don't have to go through these challenging times alone. And even though we are isolated, there are mental health professionals working in all different service ways throughout our community. And we really hope that anyone that needs it will take advantage of it, of anything they can if they need it.
Thank you, Amy. This has been a great afternoon, and I appreciate both of you joining us for, again, this first segment of Proud Parent. We hope that parents have found this time worthwhile. If you have questions, feel free to put that in the comment section, and we will share that information with our experts here and hopefully respond to you accordingly. Again, refer to the Youth First website as well as Southwestern Behavioral Healthcare website for resources and ways to connect because we are here to support you. We're in this together, and I am so glad that we shared this time with you today. I learned so much from this, and I'm really, in spite of all the craziness of this year, it has been a great time for my family to come together and to sit and listen to you as you talk, to be able to sit around a table with a teenage son and play games and interact in ways we've never had before. And so I'm thankful for this time, even though it's been a challenging time. And so parents, know that we're going to make it. We're going to get to the other side and we're going to be stronger because of it. Because we know that when there are strong families, there are stronger communities. And so thank you again for joining us this afternoon. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Sedalia. Have a good afternoon.